we'll just have the city manager take the roll.
Sure. Can you tell me who's starting tonight?
WYNNE.
Okay. Alderman WYNNE.
I know she's joining because I talked to her earlier today.
I see her audio connecting.
Okay. Alderman Wilson.
Here.
Alderman Bruce Emmons.
Here.
Alderman Suffredin.
Here.
Alderman Rainey.
Here.
Alderman Ravel.
Here. Here.
Alderman Fisk.
Here.
Alderman Fleming.
Here.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Here.
And Alderman WYNNE.
Here. Without video.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, city manager. Welcome everybody to.
But then you have to do the electrical system because of the
Could everybody, if you're
requirements
if
of
you're not
system.
the main speaker, if you could just mute, thank you. Welcome everybody to the Monday, May 11th, 2020 Evanston City Council meeting. As you can tell, we are virtual again. I'm going to ask Alderman Wilson if he'll move a motion.
Thank you. I move that we suspend the rules to allow for the conducting of our meeting through the Zoom teleconference system.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. This meeting is officially being convened then electronically or virtually this evening. I've got a couple proclamations I'd just like to announce, and then a quick update for the residents of Evanston. The first proclamation is this is Older Americans Month. We do, but there is, and it's May 2020. And it's a month to recognize all of the contributions that older Americans have made to our community. We are a better community because of the diversity of this community, including the diversity. And I just want to say I'm really, really impressed with all of the older folks in this community and all that they've done to contribute to this city, and all that they're doing right now to keep our city safe. To stay home, to work as collaboratively as they have in the midst of this pandemic. We have 17 long-term care facilities that have folks age 60 or above living in them. And there's a COVID-19 working group, and they meet once a week. They report back to the mayor's task force. And there's just been incredible collaboration between them, between our public health department, between the Illinois Department of Public Health. So it is a real honor to recognize older Americans this month. And now, therefore, I, Stephen Howard Haggerty, Mayor of the City of Evanston, do hereby proclaim May 2020 to be Older Americans Month. And I urge every resident to recognize the older adults and the people who support them as essential members of our community. So thank you. Second proclamation that I'd like to recognize this month is this is Evanston's Historic Preservation Month. Is the history of this city is rich and very deep, and that's not only the history of the people, but the history of the beautiful buildings that we have here and the institutions that we have here. So it is my pleasure to recognize this month as our Historic Preservation Month, and celebrating the people's cultural diversity by saving special places where history happened and by preserving our irreplaceable cultural heritage. This is an effective tool for managing growth and sustaining development, revitalizing communities and neighborhoods, fostering local pride and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. Historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and ethnic backgrounds. It's important that we celebrate the role of history in our lives and contributions made by dedicated individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects and heritage that has helped shape us as a people. It is now my honor as mayor of Evanston to hereby proclaim May 2020 as Evanston Preservation Month and call upon the people of Evanston to join their fellow citizens in recognizing and participating in this special observance. And a big thank you to everybody that serves on the Historic Preservation Committee, to all of those in our community development group who work on historic preservation issues on a regular basis. So thank you. Last, I just want to give folks a real quick update on the numbers. Last meeting, we ran through a whole sort of PowerPoint, giving everybody a good sense of where we stood. I'm not going to do that again. This time, we did do a message earlier this week that laid out the numbers, sort of the good and the concerning numbers. And so I just wanted to give you a quick comparison to the last time we met, which was 2 weeks ago. When we met on April 27th, we had 318 cases here in Evanston, which was an 82% increase over the prior meeting 2 weeks earlier on April 13th. Today, 2 weeks later, we have 480 confirmed cases here in Evanston, and that's a 34% increase over 2 weeks ago. So you're seeing that pace of growth slow down. It's a direct indication of all of the good work that everybody is doing to stay home, only go out for essential activities, wash your hands all the time, and wear a mask when you're out in public. It's producing results. 2 weeks ago, when we had our meeting, we had 10 deaths in Evanston. I'm sad to report 2 weeks later today, we now have 15 residents that have passed away here in Evanston. That fatality rate as a percentage of the overall number of confirmed cases that we have is a little over 3%. And lastly, on the numbers, days to double is something that we keep an eye on. 2 weeks ago, it was taking 17 days for our numbers to double here in Evanston. And now, as of today, it's taking 3 weeks, 21 days. So that's all a good indication, again, that what we're doing is having an effect in slowing down the growth and the pace of this. I did mention in the letter, and I just want everybody at home to keep this analogy in mind. It is like the board game Chutes and Ladders in some ways. And if you ever played that board game, it can be maddening because you can get near the finish line and all of a sudden you hit a chute, and the chute literally takes you back to start. And that's sort of the way that our efforts go with this. If we do not see this through, if we do not stay the course, we could find ourselves back at start and having to stop all over again and go through the pain and the misery and the sacrifice that's afflicting everybody and some more than others. So we don't want to do that. We need to stay the course, and again, the data is mixed right now, but there's some positive news, like the days to double, and in our overall growth. 7-day moving average is around 12. I don't have that stat right in front of me, but it's around 12 cases a day as our moving 7-day average. What I'd like to do now is I just want folks at home to understand the big news that came out late last week, which was Governor Pritzker's Restore Illinois framework. And it's important for everybody on the council and folks at home in Evanston to understand how this framework works. So the first thing is there are 4 big regions, and these are established regions before COVID-19. So these weren't created, as a result of COVID-19. So there are 4 regions. You can see them in the different shades of color. All right. You also see a bunch of other numbers. Okay, those numbers are EMS regions, and so you would look at where we are on this map, and we would be that sub-region 10, okay? But we're really in the Northeast region. Chicago is 11. And the reason I wanted to bring this map up, and I want everybody to understand, is the framework for reopening Illinois is based on the larger regions. So it's the 4 regions. So for us, it is that entire light blue area. Okay, and certain metrics need to be met. for us to move from one phase to the other. So let's go to the next slide, Kimberly, and just look at the phases. Okay, so there are 5 phases as part of the Restore Illinois framework. The rapid spread, and everybody's aware of the measures that the governor took and the city and other communities have taken to try to slow the spread. I went through the data a second ago, so that is working. We are in phase 2 right now, which is flattening the curve. We are absolutely flattening the curve. The peak, as we often talk about peak, and you'll start to hear them use the term plateau now, is really based on the governor's conference call or press conference that he had today, is now moving to June, to sometime in June. And so he describes that as, we are taking that, peak that we would have had, the exponential growth, and we're flattening it out. And so we are in the flattening phase. The question many folks have is, okay, how do we get from the flattening phase to the recovery phase, and then to revitalization, and then to restore? Something to know is you can move back and forth with this framework too. So to move out of flattening and to get into recovery, I'm just going to focus on this right now because this is the primary objective that I think we all have. One, thank you for making that larger. One of the criteria is you have to be under 20% positivity rate and increasing it no more than 10 percentage points over a 14-day period. Okay. In the notice that I sent out, the message I sent out to the community the other day, I noted that we were at a 16% positivity rate here in Evanston, which is good. So we're under that 20%. But we are part of that larger region. And so that larger region, right now, the positivity rate is 23%. Okay, so we need to keep doing our part, keep trying to drive down our positivity rate, right, here in Evanston, and then we help the wider region. So that's one criteria. The second one is there's no overall increase in hospital admissions for COVID-19 like illnesses for 28 days. As I reported in the message earlier this week, we are actually, as I reported the data, and I don't have the most recent data, since I sent out that email, we were heading to an increase. So we have not started that decline. And so you either have to plateau and flatten for 28 days or flatten and then start to go down. And we haven't gotten there yet. All right, so first criteria, the region is at 23% positivity. You have to be under 20% for at least a 14-day period with no increase of more than 10 percentage points. You have to have overall decrease in hospital admissions for 20, I say decrease, but no overall increase in hospital admissions for 28 days. Okay, and we know we were going up as of last week when I sent that message. So we keep track of that number closely and we'll continue to. And then lastly, there has to be an available surge capacity of at least 14% of the ICU beds, medical and surgical beds, and ventilators. On that factor, this Northeast region is doing well. We have 17% medical and surgical beds available. We have 19% ICU units available, and we have 64% ventilators are available. So we're hitting the metrics on that third requirement, but we need to continue to bring down the positivity rate in this region, and our hospitalization needs to plateau. So that's just a quick update on the Restore Evanston. We have a recovery team working with members of the community, and it's a city team working with members of the community, and we'll report out more about recovery plans as we see the direction that the data is going and when we're hopeful that we can move to that next phase. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that I continue to have, and I know others do, real heartburn and concern about the budget implications of COVID-19. As fiduciaries of the city, we have responsibility to make sure we, operate the city with a balanced budget. The shortfall that we have facing us is at least $10 million. And remember, the way the city manager did that estimate, it was, come June 1st, we moved into sort of that next phase of reopening. And the data that I just presented right here, if the governor's framework, continues to be implemented, it's hard to see that we open on June 1st with that criteria that I just laid out and where we are on a couple of those. So that means the budget could be even worse than 10 million. These are, and I just want people in the public to know, these are going to be difficult decisions. These aren't decisions that anybody on this council or I or the city manager's office ever wanted to face, but they're going to have to be made. And it's going to be some shared sacrifice. Hopefully it'll be equitable in how the council and city manager's office and I go about doing this. But it's just going to be a really difficult process, but we have no choice. The budget is not on the agenda tonight, so I believe that will come back again in 2 weeks when we meet. But I just want to make sure everybody understands the severity of it. We continue, all the council members, myself, our other elected officials, to advocate to our state elected officials, to our federal elected officials, to provide aid to help support the localities all around this country, because everyone is in this predicament. It's not just the city of Evanston. We're going to continue to fight hard to do that. So with that, I'd like to move on now to the city manager and any announcements you may have, Erica.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we will have the budget on for discussion May 26th. That will be our next meeting, the day after Memorial Day. We're going to go over month end for first quarter of this year, and then just provide an overall update on where we are and what we have ahead of us. I did also want to announce that last week I made an announcement of implementation of furlough days for our non-union staff, and I have requested the same of our union staff. Now, of course, we are only in the second year of a 4-year contract with our represented union staff, but given the current situation that we're in, I've been having ongoing dialogue with all 4 of those unions, and I have requested that they consider making that same concession. If those unions were to agree to that, that would be that $2.2 million that we talked about at the last meeting, which would certainly go a long way towards closing the gap that we're trying to close. So I hope that we have more to update on the 26th with regards to that. If the unions do agree to this, we're planning to do a citywide shutdown a week from today on Monday. So if we can get to an agreement this week, there'll be a communication about that. So we would potentially be moving garbage pickup next week, or I'm sorry, recycling pickup to Tuesday or one day later in the week, just like we would do the following week for Memorial Day. So I hope to have more information about that soon, but I don't have any more this evening. And so that concludes my announcement. Thank you.
Erica, could you give one more update? Last week we talked about the lakefront and the damage to the lakefront, and I think a decision came in. Can you just let the council and public know that?
Yes, so we did receive notice from the federal government that our application did not pass muster on the required total amount of dollar damage for the lakefront storms that caused the damage earlier this year. So we will not be receiving any federal funding to mitigate the damage that was caused due to those storms. So the total dollar value of the entire lakefront, including Chicago, wasn't deemed to be meeting the initial threshold of what was needed for that declaration to take place. So it's disappointing news, but it was worth a shot, and we'll have to continue to move forward, figuring out how to fund that out of our own limited reserves and other capital options. So I've been in contact with the various engineers who are working on this, and they are collaborating with Northwestern. We're trying to see the most cost-effective way that we can accomplish some of the work that needs to be done in the near term. I know that everybody's interested in when the beaches are going to open this summer, and in talking with the Director of Parks and Recreation, all the beaches look like they're going to be open this summer except for Greenwood Street Beach. That is one that has the most sustained damage, and it also has the least amount of sand available. It's practically gone. So that's disappointing, but the rest of the beaches we see opening and being able to do the work that needs to be done after the beach season concludes in the fall. So if we can get some economy of scale by partnering with Northwestern on doing the work together, or any kind of savings, we're going to explore that. Otherwise, we'll just go out for bid and contract ourselves. So we'll have more information about that. But the urgency that we had to get some of this work done before we open the beaches is mitigated by the fact that we're not opening Greenwood Street Beach, because that is the one that had some of the most big damage.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Is there a report out from the city clerk or the deputy city clerk? Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah.
The city clerk unfortunately had an emergency and will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. His dog is in the emergency.
Oh no, okay. All right, well, we wish your dog the best, Clerk Reed. Okay, Kimberly, if you don't mind, then I'm gonna ask you just to serve as the deputy clerk tonight when we need to take the roll. Okay, then, but we're gonna move now to public comment. They sent me the sign up beforehand, and I had 3 people that were signed up for public comment this evening. Dennis Harder, Tina Payden, and Doreen Price. So welcome. Per our rules, each of you get up to 3 minutes, and I'll keep track of the 3 minutes. Dennis, I believe you're going to be on video, so if you want to turn it on and join us.
Hi, Mayor. This is Luke Stowe. It's actually not going to be Des. Tina Payden will be the first speaker.
Okay, Tina. All right. Well, welcome, Tina. Tina.
Yeah, hi.
Welcome.
Hi. How's everyone? Hopefully everyone is safe and well during this pandemic. I just had a couple of comments. It says $1 million for the hotel expenses, but then when you look on the page 49, it says 100,000. So I'm trying to know if it's 100,000 or if it's $1 million. Doesn't really give a good explanation. But one of my main concerns, which I've been asking about for some time, is the exit plan and the date for the families at the hotel. What do you have as far as an exit plan for these families? And how many people are from Evanston that are staying in the hotel, and how many are from outside of Evanston? And how much money is going to be given for rapid rehousing and ESG, and who will be getting the money and who will be managing the money? And the last question, if families are needing assistance, who do they contact to get help? Because I have several families that are asking me, and they've been calling the city and different agencies, and there's no response. I know that Connections was managing some of the families at the hotel, and they wanted to keep the families at the hotel until this is over. So it's a lot of unanswered questions, and a lot of people are in need that are not in the hotel, and some that are in the hotel. And if the exit strategy will be, seen soon, because they need to be placed in regular apartments. It's a lot of money to have people at the hotel, and then you have to feed them because they don't have kitchens and so forth. So I would like to know mostly the exit plan and the money that's coming for them to be placed in regular affordable units, which I have available at starting June 1st. So I just wanted to talk about that.
Thank you, Tina. So what we'll do is that item's on the special order of business today. So we'll have a conversation and we'll get Sarah on in that conversation and get some of those questions answered for you and explain.
Okay.
Dollars. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much. And everybody be well.
Thank you. You too. Next up, we've got Doreen Price. Doreen, welcome, Doreen.
Yeah, I have to wait.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me now. Thank
We
you.
can hear you. Welcome. You're on with the city council, Doreen.
Thank you very much. Geez, only 3 people today. I got to get Revi's picture in there. I might be able to draw more people. Okay. So, I submitted my comment, and so it has 2 articles associated with it. And so I start off by thanking the Evanston Roundtable for informing and standing up for citizens and good governance. The Roundtable editorial named Reconsider Public Health Fines, and I have the link included. And then I'm asking the City Council for today, please reconsider what was called A14 at the last council meeting, as described in the editorial above and in light of emerging reports such as Washington Post below. There's good reason not to rush ordinances, especially when circumstances are evolving in ways difficult to predict, as described in the Washington Post COVID-19 article below. The case for oversight is even stronger when anyone dialing 311 can anonymously complain of noncompliance without training, accountability, or vetting. Trained professionals have grossly erred in enforcing the letter of the law that harms rather than protects with essential experience and judgment, as we can see from the article. Effective and community policing, community building policies are essential to who we are if we really do value environmental and social justice as Evanstonians. There's no substitute for ordinances incorporating our professed values. What good if far more lives are destroyed or shortened in our defective and delayed process of remediation when proper ordinance building and outcomes build community we profess and want to be. Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council.
Hello?
Hi,
Steve, you're muted.
was I muted?
No, you were not. Steve is now, so he's talking to somebody.
Sorry, I'm talking to myself. Yeah, no one can hear me. Luke, do we have anyone else then that was signed up?
Yes, there's one more, Mayor. Virginia Mann, she's on the phone now.
Great. Welcome, Virginia.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I am calling in regarding the elm tree injection program. I understand that there is a proposal on the table to stretch out the injections so that of the ones to be injected this year, only half would be done and the other half would be done next year. For those who have not had a chance to read the letter I sent, I co-founded TREE to Rescue Evanston Elms 20 years ago in response to the removal of many of our beloved elm trees. Elm trees, as you know, are some of the most magnificent trees we have here in Evanston. They provide shade, they absorb rainwater, they provide a home to a great deal of wildlife, they have the cooling effect of 5 air conditioners, and most importantly, they enhance the ambiance of our community and our property values. The cost of cutting down elm trees is huge, as it is for any large mature tree. Back at the time when we founded TREE, the city had spent more than $4 million cutting down 1,300 of our majestic elm trees. That includes the cost for labor, equipment, replacement, etc. it does not include the damage to property values and the ambience of our community. At that time, thousands of Evanston residents joined our movement to help save our elm trees by getting the city to inject them. The council was presented with thousands of signatures on petitions. There were hundreds of green ribbons tied around our elm trees. Hundreds of people showed up at multiple city council meetings, and the council meeting where it was voted on had the largest turnout of any council meeting I've ever been at in terms of citizen participation. With 98% effectiveness rate, this injection program has proven to be extremely valuable. When I learned that you're thinking about pushing off some of the injections to next year, I contacted Tom Prosser, who is a nationwide expert in elm trees and the elm tree injection program. He was the person who we called upon to help set up the program here in Evanston years ago. And he tells us that we can expect to see, if we treat not every 3 years, but push some of them off to every 4 years, that the coverage rate on the tree drops significantly, likely to below 25%. This means that the trees will be highly susceptible to an infection that most likely will kill the tree. And don't forget, because of root grafting, it could take down any other elm trees along with it. We've had a very mild winter, which means that pests like the elm tree beetle, the Japanese beetle that kills elm trees, the emerald ash borer, and others are going to be more prevalent than they have been for many years. So I think that extending out some of the injections to 4 years is going to result in far more trees being taken down than what staff has indicated. They're taking a guess at this. Our expert says that the numbers are actually going to be much higher than what we are estimating. He estimates that we would lose approximately 5 to 15% of our elm trees, depending on how well the city manages the fungus in our area. The other factor that I want to point out is in my neighborhood, we were injecting our elm trees long before this program ever went into effect. The same was true in some other areas of Evanston as well. We're very fortunate in that that's something that we could afford to do. But part of why this tree program was so important was so that all of Evanston could benefit from this. Parts of Evanston who might not have the disposable income, particularly during this economic crisis, to spare funds to inject programs, shouldn't lose the environmental benefits or the economic benefits of having mature trees in their community, not to mention the ambiance they add to their community. Maintaining the injection program at its current rate is fiscally sound. I'm a fiscal conservative, which is actually how I got involved in this to begin with, because I thought it was crazy we were spending all this money cutting down trees that diminished our property values. So I hope that you will do the fiscally responsible thing, maintain the elm tree injection program at the rate it is, and I will forward you this letter from Tom Prosser, who, as I said, is a nationally recognized expert on elm tree care, and in fact, tomorrow is doing a program for arborists on this very topic.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and I do want to take a moment to say thank you to each of you. Good government has never been more important than it is today, and I feel like no matter what in Evanston, we have thoughtful, responsible aldermen and mayor, and I appreciate your consideration. So thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, Virginia. Okay.
Mayor, I apologize for interrupting. There was a comment that had been sent to Clerk Reed that we were copied on, and I think probably that person was assuming Clerk Reed was going to be here to make that comment. So I guess just to ensure that that person doesn't go unheard, I would like to just mention that Mr. Vasilko had written to the clerk asking that, I'll just paraphrase here, he's asking that the A2 new vehicle lift be rejected. I'm sorry, I should say postponed. He's also suggesting that the emergency generators be spread out over 3 years. He also indicates he doesn't think that this Zoom process is a fair participation opportunity for citizens. And he's suggesting that senior positions be eliminated before the lower paid positions are eliminated. So again, paraphrasing, but I didn't want him to go unheard in Clerk Reed's absence. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. Luke, is there anyone else for public comment?
That is it, Mayor.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening and expressing your questions and your perspective on different issues. We're now going to go ahead and move to the agenda. The first item on our agenda is SP1, the Affordable Housing Fund Expense Report. And I'm going to ask the, let's see, Alderman Rainey, could you move this item? Oh, we can't hear you, Ann. You're muted. Ann, you're muted.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Now, this is the Affordable Housing Fund Expense Report. Staff is recommending that the City Council accept and place on file the status report regarding Affordable Housing Fund. City Affordable Housing Fund balance as of April 13 is $3,933,960. There is $1,536,759 at Byline Bank and $2,396,931 is invested. And then there's a comment that they needed information from finance, I guess, at the time this was written. Anticipated expenses for the remainder of 2020 total approximately $1,334,200. I'm wondering if there is a report to be made by our staff on this.
Can you just move it for action and we'll get a second?
I will move this for action. It's to be accepted and placed on file.
Second.
All right. Ms. Storley, do you or is Sarah Flax want to give us a report out? Go ahead, Erica.
Yes, actually, I was going to check with Sarah to see if we have a presentation or is this just a discussion item?
It is just a discussion item. We were asked to provide it, and I can answer any questions that anyone has. What I've tried to do is show what has been, what as of when this was written, which was in April, what expenses and revenues were expected for the rest of this fiscal year. Because I think it's important to make sure that we acknowledge commitments that have been made, like the Evergreen project, in our consideration of what funds are available. I'm including that as committed, so I don't think we should, if we're looking at other uses for the Affordable Housing Fund, I don't think we should allocate that full $1.5 million at this point, because I don't know that we have timing of any large influxes of cash that would make up for that and allow us to meet our commitments. So that's why when I, on the page where the budgets are shown, I include the entire commitment to Evergreen out of the Affordable Housing Fund in that estimated budget for the rest of this year.
Sarah, I have a couple questions for this. The I-8, the inclusionary housing wait list, is the $30,000 the total amount we pay for the year for that?
That is approximately what we owe them for the contract, and we will have to do a renewed contract because we've extended the time frame for this one because the rent up for Albion and Avador is somewhat later than was originally, but that's approximately the amount I expect will be expended this in the contract that we're currently finishing up.
Okay, so I would like to have a report or just the numbers on that, how many people are on the waiting list, how many people have come off the list, and so forth. Also, the other program costs, are those just staff fees in terms of salaries that are paid out of here?
No, the salaries are pretty much in the administration budget. We have we have a category that we have, the other probing costs is for a whole range of different things. Most of the expenses that come out of there are some legal expenses that we've been paying for pursuing no cash bid properties, also for properties that we have negotiated deeds in lieu of foreclosure to get possession of properties like the 1729 Dodge property that was the site for the most recent one of the ETHS houses. So it's a wide range of smaller costs that have just been aggregated into other program costs.
Okay, so when we revisit this, can we have those broken down? I know we get those requests as they come in, but I'm more interested in just having a better idea of what they are. And then lastly, for the HMIS, is that the fee that we pay for, because I remember we talked about this last year, is that the fee we pay for the, what is it, like North Suburban Homeless, what is that? Alliance on Homelessness?
Yes, it's the Homeless Information Management System that is used by the Alliance to End Homelessness. We have to coordinate our ESG money with that, with the Alliance and through the Coordinated Entry Program. And we will have to do the same with the ESG CV money that we're getting. One of the things that we could perhaps look at is because the ESG CV money has no match, and we may be able to say we can help pay some of the costs of running the HMIS system, especially if it has to be expanded, from the CV funding, from the ESG CV funding, and we may be able to maybe not use Affordable Housing Fund dollars this year, but it was budgeted, so I left it in there.
Okay, so my concern with that is the same that I've had, which is I understand our participation in the Alliance and Homelessness, but for our ESG, that is managed through Connections usually, right? We pass through that money to Connections, and then they have their own access to HMIS. And our current staff, particularly like our general assistant staff, when they're trying to, intake and assess folks, do not, my understanding is they do not have access to HMIS, and that would be helpful for some of their work. So I would just love for us to think about how, if we're paying into HMIS, how we can actually have access to the program for our own staff for their benefit. And then I guess I just have concerns if we are passing through the money to Connections, the ESG money, and they have their own access to HMIS. I guess I'm not sure why we're then paying double for HMIS. I understand the part for the Alliance, but you mentioned needing to have access to it for ESG, but Connections manages our ESG funds.
They do, but we do not give them any money. Our ESG money is not allocated for HMIS. What we have done in the past is we have used Affordable Housing Fund money for HMIS because that helps the Alliance more in terms of accessing their federal funding for HMIS because that had a match requirement. So I have to make sure that we aren't going to miss any of our match requirements that would make it impossible for the Alliance to access that money to support the HMIS system.
Right. Okay. So I would like us to investigate if our staff in the building need HMIS for their work, if that would help us in serving people. Obviously, particularly in this time where people need lots of service and people are not, everyone's working remotely, it might behoove us to have our own access in-house so that we're not causing more barriers for people.
And I believe we can get that, and I will pursue that.
Thank you.
Anything
Any
else?
other questions?
Alderman Ruth Simmons.
Yeah, I wanted to add to Alderman Fleming's request, if you could make sure that you break out the housing unit need. So if it's families, seniors, single member households, if you could break out that need as well on the central housing wait list.
Okay.
Anything else? Sarah, while we have you, do you want to address, there were a lot of questions that Tina Payden had during public comment. You could either address them here or just reach out to her separately if you had time and just give her an update on the questions she had.
I can do whichever I don't want to go into the details that she may want to follow, but I'm
Yeah,
happy.
why don't we do that then? Why don't you just follow up with her just so you can get her up to date on all those.
Sure,
items.
absolutely.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So this was moved for action to accept and place on file, and it was seconded. Seeing no more comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. None to hear a vote. This is accepted and placed on file. Alderman Rainey, can you take us to SP2? You're on mute again. You want to unmute, Ann? Ann, you're on mute.
Oh, I didn't, no, I'm not muted.
No, now you're not. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. City Council authorization is being requested to use up to $1 million from the city's Affordable Housing Fund to pay for non-congregate housing, hotel rooms, and other needs, including but not limited to food and transportation for homeless residents who are vulnerable to the COVID-19 infection, unable to observe Governor Pritzker's order to shelter in place, as well as residents and first responders who have exposed to COVID-19 or who have tested positive for the virus, do not require hospitalization, but are unable to isolate or quarantine in their residence. The funding source is the Affordable Housing Fund, which currently has an uncommitted cash balance of approximately $2,200,000. This is for action. I move approval. And Mayor, I'd like to speak to this.
Second.
All right. So it's moved and seconded. Alderman Rainey?
Yeah. I spoke earlier today with Erica about this. And if you will go to the memo that comes with this item, in the last two paragraphs, especially the last paragraph, it addresses, when I first read this, I was horrified, thinking we were going to deplete the Affordable Housing Fund. But there is a caveat that, not so much a caveat, but an explanation that we are going to most likely, almost definitely be reimbursed for these funds. And I would like included in the authorization to use the money that the last two paragraphs that we are going to be reimbursed for this money. In other words, it's not just a total commitment for these funds. And I have it written out how almost verbatim those last two paragraphs. And Ms. Storley agreed that it absolutely should be included in this recommendation that we use the money. So
Thank you, Alderman. Any other comments, questions?
I have a couple questions.
Alderman Fleming?
So thanks for bringing that up, Alderman Rainey. In following FEMA, though, I know we have already, I believe, put in our application, but there is no guarantee we're getting the FEMA reimbursement. I mean, I know we've kept our paperwork in order, and that is our high hope, but there is no guarantee, correct? We have not heard back yet.
I would just say, like, I've been a little involved in that process on this particular item. I think they have put all the documentation in place to make the best case, and the case that, frankly, other major cities around this country have successfully made, and gotten information back from FEMA indicating that, yes, this is reimbursable. But like you, yeah, I never use the word guarantee. But I feel like the city's done everything they've done. And again, they've mimicked New York City and other big cities that have much, much larger programs than Evanston does doing similar housing or shelter.
Okay. So then to follow that, so the FEMA reimbursement is 75%. And last I looked, I can't remember how much we haven't quite spent $1 million, or to the level where that would be our reimbursement. But my bigger questions have to do with what's in here. So we talked about providing shelter for, I guess this is maybe listing the FEMA reimbursed things. So providing shelter for people who needs to quarantine but can't stay in the residence. And I thought we were coordinating with the state and with the county for that. So I guess in reading this, I just want to just quadruple check that the things that we have said in here, a couple of them we have not been able to do. I know Paul worked really hard to get a contract with the local hotel for those isolation rooms in the hotel, which is their purview, decided not to go with those. So, just reading that, I want to just make sure we're using the right language. But my other question has to do more so with the some of the money that we've already laid out for hotels. And I know some of that was funding and some of that was some other ways in which we were able to pay for them. So is this money going directly to the hotels, or is this money being passed through to connections? How are we just, covering all these costs? I know that a lot of things have been paid for already. Are they all been paid for by the city, or are they paid for by other entities that we are then reimbursing?
Sure, I can speak to that, and I might forget your second question before I finish answering your first one, so you might have to repeat it. But the agreements that we have for housing homeless residents are agreements directly with the hotels themselves. So we are directly paying the hotels for the room costs. Support costs and any damages and things like that are picked up by connections and other entities. So we've had expenses at several hotels so far. We do have a separate agreement with one that has some reimbursable expenses built into it. And the agreements with the other hotels do not. So those are ones where we've paid directly to the hotels for a set number of rooms, and anything over that amount that we've set is being picked up by other sources. So I believe it's 64 rooms is the total number of costs at one hotel, and then 40 rooms at another hotel. And that is the cap on what we're paying. And I did
Okay. No, that was good. So then I guess my next question has to do with, or maybe just comment, has to do with what Ms. Payton talked about. At some point, who knows when we're coming out of shelter in place, but at some point we can't, it would be great to have 4 rooms forever, but we can't do that. So at the next meeting, maybe when you go over the budget, can we have some kind of update on if there's been a conversation of transitioning, what our cap is in terms of funding, if this is going to take down most of our affordable housing fund and we're looking at a $10 million deficit. I would imagine there's some conversation about the next phases of this type of shelter just being financially, we can't afford it forever. So if we could give that update, whatever the conversation is during the budget meeting, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none. Deputy City Clerk Richardson, could you please take the roll?
Alderman WYNNE.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin.
Aye.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Alderman Flint.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Passed 9-0.
Thank you. So SB2, approval authorization to use up to $1 million from the Affordable Housing Fund to pay for non-congregate housing and other services incurred by the city to provide for the health and safety of residents who are unable to comply with Governor Pritzker's stay-at-home order. Passes 9-0. All right, we're now going to move to the consent agenda. Alderman Fleming, could you take us through the consent agenda, and if you wouldn't mind, start off with the approval of the minutes.
Sure. I am going to move consent agenda not A1. CM1 is the approval of minutes for regular city council meeting we had on April 27th, 2020. A1 starts the APNW agenda, approval of City of Evanston payroll and bills. Staff recommends we approve payroll for period April 13th through April 26th, 2020 in the amount of $2,780,281.75, and the bills list for May 12th, 2020 in the amount of $3,142,461.05. A2, I'm going to remove from the consent agenda, please. A3, I would like to move as well off the agenda. A4 is the approval of an amendment to the agency agreement for the management of natural gas purchase as an amendment to the agreement for the purchase of natural gas for 16 city-owned buildings. Staff is recommending the council authorize city manager to negotiate and execute Amendment 4 to the agency agreement with Northwestern University for the management of natural gas purchase. Staff also is recommending we authorize city manager to execute Amendment A8 to the agreement with Twin Eagle Resource Management LLC for the purchase of natural gas for 16 city-owned buildings. A5, I have a question about, so I'm removing that one, please. A6 is contract for award with Ideal Heating Company for Civic.
Fleming, can you please remove that item?
A6 is off. A7 is approval for contract award with J.A. Johnson Paving Company for the 2020 street patching program. Staff recommends council authorize city manager execute a one-year contract for pavement patching with J.A. Johnson Paving Company out of Arlington Heights in the amount of $500,000. Funding comes from the Capital Improvement Fund 2020 General Obligation Bonds. A8 is approval.
A8.
A8 is off the agenda. A9 is Resolution 40-R-20, authorizing city manager to execute an intergovernmental police assistance agreement with North Regional Major Crimes Task Force, also known as NORTAF. Staff recommends council adoption of this resolution to authorize the city manager to execute an intergovernmental police agreement with NORTAF. A10 is Resolution 41-R-20, extending the declared state of emergency to June 8th, 2020. A11 is Resolution 42 Actually, I have a question by A10, please. We'll take that off, please. A11, Resolution 42-R-20, terminating limits of third-party food delivery service fees on June 8th, 2020. Staff recommends City Council adoption of this resolution that would terminate limits on third-party delivery service fees on June 8th, 2020. A12 is
Please remove A12.
A12 is off. A13 is Ordinance 51-0-20, authorizing the sale of aging surplus fleet vehicles and equipment owned by the City of Evanston. Staff recommends we adopt this ordinance, directing city manager to offer the sale of vehicles and equipment owned by the city through public auction with Gov Deals and online auction system utilized by government agencies. That is for introduction. That is the consent agenda.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any conversation? All right, seeing none, Deputy Clerk Richardson, could you please take the roll on the consent agenda?
Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton, Alderman Sufferton,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming,
Aye.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
All approved 9-0.
Thank you. Consent agenda passes the City Council on 9-0 vote. We're now going to move to the items that were removed from the agenda. The first one is A2. Alderman Fleming, could you introduce that?
Yeah, A2 is approval of purchase of a vehicle lift from Mohawk Resources Limited. Staff recommends we approve the lift through a Sorwell contract in the amount of $95,000. This is for action.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, this is open for discussion. Alderman-
Yeah, I had a question. The memo mentioned that we had a number of lifts. I can't remember how many. And I know it gave an amount in terms of how much this one could handle. But if staff could help me understand, I know it needs to be fixed. Does it need to be fixed now? Can the other lifts handle the job this lift did?
Good evening, Mayor Haggerty, members of the City Council, Sean Cholik. I can answer this question for you. This is one of 8 lifts that's set up in the fleet shop. And the way that our team works with these lifts is that we'll have a number of different vehicles coming in throughout the day. And we will have mechanics that will be working on these different vehicles. And they may have the lift, they may have one vehicle up on the lift. They have lifted up in the air, dismantled, taken a look at what the issues are, determine what parts are needed, and then they place an order for parts. In the meantime, at that point, they leave it in the air ready to be worked on, and then they can bounce over to a different vehicle on a different lift. So it's very critical that we have all 8 of these lifts in operation, so that we can make the most of our time and be as efficient as possible to get these vehicles back on the street. This particular lift that we want to replace has been red tagged due to not passing lift inspections. And the original capacity of this one is 19,800 pounds. We were able to find a pretty good comparable price to get an even heavier duty one, which would allow us more versatility. So the new one will be lifting 50,000 pounds.
John, how often do we have all 8 lifts in operation?
I would say pretty much every day we've got them. They're constantly working in operation. So the majority of the time we're utilizing all of them.
Forgive me because I'm not a mechanic, but when you mentioned them having the car up and waiting for the parts and all that, can they not bring the car down and then use that other lift? I am not to discount the work you all are doing. I know you're trying to keep our fleet as long as possible, but obviously I'm doing all I can to not spend more money with the deficit.
Sure. And we totally understand that. And you know, if I didn't feel it was a necessity, I wouldn't bring this forward. But basically, when they have it up in the air, they've got certain components of it tore apart. So to bring it down and try to move it is not it's not something that we can do. You know, obviously we can always hold off on a piece of equipment, but it does impact our efficiency.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess I would
Sure.
jump in, or is there anyone else in front of me to speak?
No, go ahead, Alderman Braithwaite.
Yeah, I would say, Sean, we're going to be challenged throughout this whole year to find areas to save. And if the inconvenience of, you know, having one lift down with 7 still working properly, I may support Alderman Fleming in her concern and say if we can hold off on this until we can get through this recovery period. I think that, you know, I just want to make sure we're clear that you can function, you know, operationally at capacity with the 7 lifts.
We can function, we just can't function as well as we typically do.
Okay.
Anything's possible, but it will impact the operations. I do have concerns with it. You know, we've got a lot of departments that rely upon us to get the equipment out, and I don't want to let them down by not having the equipment ready for them.
Okay.
But I do understand the concerns.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Braithwaite. We had Alderman Wilson, then Alderman Rainey.
Thank you. And just based on the specifications of this, it's obvious that we're not talking about a, like a lift at a Midas store that's picking up cars. This is for the heavier equipment, right? 50,000 pounds. That's, you know, salt trucks, fire trucks, things of that nature, right?
Yeah, that's correct. This wouldn't lift a fire engine, but it would lift a lot of the heavier equipment.
Okay. And then, so how many of the other 8 lifts have this kind of a capacity?
I want to, off the top of my head, I believe that there's a number of lifts that can lift we've got one lift that can lift up the fire engines. We've got a couple that can do larger equipment. I want to say that we've only got a few that can do smaller SUVs and pickup trucks. You know, so definitely the increased lifting capacity would be helpful here.
Okay, I just hesitate to, you know, if you take apart a salt truck, you know, you can't, you have to put it back together, right? If you have to take it down, you have to put it back together, and then you have to lift it back up and take it apart again. It seems like it's going to take the equipment out for an undue period of time, and that's going to really probably have a significant impact on ability to deliver the services that people need. So I hesitate to put that one off. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Rainey?
Well, my question was along the lines of Don. What are the vehicles that need a 50,000 pound lift?
So that's a very good question. So we would be able to lift some empty garbage trucks with this. We would be able to lift the dump trucks. You know, nothing too heavy. I mean, some of the larger forestry trucks would probably be difficult to lift with this. So, you know, and then the other thing that I want to note is that, you know, we do have one other lift that passed the inspections, but it's also very old and obsolete. And the fear is that we don't quite know when that one will be out of commission either. That one may not pass the next inspection, or it may just fail when we're starting to use it, which would mean it would require extensive amounts of money to replace it, since the parts are obsolete and also hard to find. It's that old of a model. So that would be my other concern, is that we would lose another lift in the midst of all this and not be able to, you know, essentially we'd be down 2 lifts instead of, you know, just the one. So,
What are we going to get up for a trade-in on this one? That you're going to are you replacing one with this, right?
they typically don't trade them in. I think it would be taken apart, dismantled, decommissioned, scrapped.
Okay.
Alderman
All right.
Braithwaite, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's just a follow-up, Sean, and I'll
Sure.
just direct the question. So if I was to drive by tomorrow and set up a camera or sit, what you're communicating to this body and the public is that out of the 5 days of the week, every single day, we would drive by and see a City of Evanston vehicle on one of those 8 lifts.
For the most part, yes.
And in
On all
the
of them.
situation,
The only time, sure.
Go
ahead.
you know where my question is. In the situations where we would not have 8 vehicles up in the air, what's going on that particular day?
So in that case, it would probably be due to 2 mechanics being on vacation and 2 calling in sick or something like that. So, you know, there are certain periods where they wouldn't be used, or maybe they would be working extensively on a fire truck where I've got 2 mechanics pulled onto a fire truck because they're such large pieces of equipment and complex. So in those cases, you may see that the lift isn't being, you know, not all the lifts are being utilized, but I would say for the most part, they are constantly rotating in and out of them.
Any other questions? Okay, this was moved and seconded. Deputy Clerk Richardson, could you please take the roll on A2?
Yes, Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons, I'm sorry, Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin,
No.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming,
No.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
No.
Okay, so we have a.
I got it, Kimberly. I can run that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so A2, approval purchase of the vehicle lift from Mohawk Resources, passes the Evanston City Council on a 6-3. Alderman Fleming, could you take us to A3?
Yes, A3 is the approval of contract award with Robert something, Tree Experts and Landscaping Company. Staff recommends city manager to execute a contract for the Dutch tree inoculation program. Contract to the lowest bidder in the amount of $646,224.62 for action.
Second.
Second.
Okay, this is open for discussion. Alderman Fleming?
Yeah, I removed this just because I know we had a longer discussion yesterday, our last meeting. I still plan to vote no, not because I'm anti-trees and so on and so forth, but this is coming out of our general fund, and we've just asked all of our staff to take 10 days off of work unpaid, and I just cannot communicate to our staff that, you know, I approve spending $700,000 on trees when they are sitting home taking furlough days. So I'll continue to vote no for this.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
Thank you. And, you know, one of the things to remember here is that it costs more to take the trees out, so that's a factor. But I am mindful of the economic circumstances, obviously. I don't think we should pursue the this particular contract. I appreciate that the staff and Director Stoneback has put together an alternate option, and I am more interested in pursuing the alternate option, which would save us, I forget the exact number, but hundreds of thousands of dollars over the bid amount. So my intention is not to vote for this, but hopefully we can get a bid in the package next time for the alternate option.
City Manager Story?
Thank you. I just wanted to interject because I know that the timing of this is critical. So if that was the desire of the council, it would be best to just amend the existing motion to award that contract the way that it is stated in the memo.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will move that we amend the item to pursue the alternate option as set forth in the memorandum.
Second.
Okay. So now this is open for discussion. Alderman Rainey?
Oh. You're muted.
You're muted.
Muted. She probably doesn't know.
Sorry, there it is. I'm just going to explain the alternate option as I understand it, and that is to basically divide the original motion in half. In other words, to do part of the trees 1 year and the rest of the trees the second year. It's going to cause the loss of some trees, but it is better than nothing. And we've been doing this for so many years, and we cannot afford to lose more trees than the alternate option is going to cause, because, like we said, it costs more money to cut these trees down than it does to inject them. So the alternate option is not a good option, but it is the second best option. And I'm going to support Alderman Wilson's alternative, and it is going to save several $100,000. So thank you for making the motion.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fisk? Alderman Wynn?
Thank you. Am I off mute? Yeah.
You are.
I've really been struggling with this since we got the package, since 2 weeks ago. I was on the council when all those hundreds of people came to the council, and Virginia Man and Tree brought us the numbers on what it costs to cut down the elms, and actually convinced us to try the Arbortech, even though at that point it was very unclear that it would be as successful as it was. And then lo and behold, we discovered it was remarkably successful. But we also learned back then about all of the other factors that go into the spread of Dutch elm disease, and including weather. And one of the best things that we learned about for protecting our Dutch elm trees was to have a polar vortex. And we haven't had one of those for a couple of years. In fact, we've had exactly the kind of winter, as she said, that makes the elm tree disease just flourish. And so as much as I have just really struggled over this, because I do recognize the budget issues that we are facing, given the information that we have had, and I think I know that my opinion would be different if we had just had a bitter cold winter. But given the fact that we have had this kind of winter and the information that we all learned years ago, I can't support it. But I do recognize my colleagues, and I think, as Ann said, these are two difficult choices, but I can't support this. I really want us to hold on to the trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Ravel?
Excuse me. I too have been struggling with this for the last week or so, and I've come to the opposite conclusion from Alderman Wynne, and I do think it would be such a significant savings for this particular budget year, and it's really unfortunate that we have to make this choice, but I will be supporting Alderman Wilson's amendment.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was going to make the same suggestion. I appreciate our staff for bringing this alternative that helps us to, get, I guess, meet halfway. But I do have another question to Dave or whoever our arborist. This seems like a lot of money for the contract. And it's a stupid question, but I'll ask it. Is this something that our staff can be trained to do? I mean, I have no idea. I wanted to Google the process to get a better understanding, but my ignorance allows me to ask the question of, get the formula, inject it into the tree. Is this something that we could send 2 or 3 or 4 staff, a summer youth, to learn what that process is entailed and bring back that technology and solution to inoculate our trees for a much cheaper price point?
Peter, our staff does do some of the inoculation.
Okay, see,
We'll have Director Stoneback address that, and then and put your hand up if you want to talk after Director Stoneback. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Mayor Haggerty and council members. Staff does inject about 185 trees a year now. So we're doing approximately 23% of the elm trees are completed in-house. You have to be a certified pesticide applicator to be able to do this work. So it's not something that summer youth could do. And there's quite a bit of skill involved with doing it properly as well. We perceive that we might be able to take on about 100 more trees a year in-house once we can buy some more equipment and have more people get their pesticides license. But unfortunately, we can't do that this year. The state being closed, you can't get a pesticides license. So, and there's no way that we could ever take over so much that we could avoid doing the contract. There's just too many trees and too much other work for the forestry employees to do to just do this. And it's a very limited time that you can do it. You should really be doing it during the growing season, which is why we brought this back right away to this council meeting, because we would need to award this contract so the contractor can get out here and get the work done during the appropriate time of year. We'll be coming back at the next council meeting to purchase about $38,000 worth of the fungicide chemical that you actually treat with the trees with, and that's what we will use with our in-house forces to treat the other trees this year.
Dave, just my follow-up question is, can you ask that company to break down that $607,000 bid? I'm just, my own ignorance. I'd love to see how much of that is the formula, how much is it the labor, travel, what all their expenses are. And you can shoot that to me direct if you want.
Okay, we did not ask that in the bid. We only get a unit price, a cost per inch, but I can reach out to him and see if he would share that information with us, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? Alderman Fisk.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish we weren't voting on this before we saw the report that Virginia Mann mentioned in her comments. I would like to see that. This is not like putting off a lift at the service center. Dealing with the trees is much different. When you're fighting Dutch elm, as Ms. Mann reflected, so much of the problems with the trees are going on underneath where the roots come and meet. I mean, if you put off injecting one tree, it may affect a whole series of trees in an area. And we went through many years of thinking about the priority of our elm trees and why, and comparing that with the cost of taking them down. I just don't feel that we've got the information here to make a good decision on this. I'm thinking that we're taking so many steps backwards, not intentionally, but we're going to end up in a much worse place. again, this is, I've removed, as Mr. Stonebeck knows, removed elm trees from my yard, and we've tried to deal with them on a case-by-case basis. That really is almost impossible to do that. I don't know how in the world you divide up which elms are going to be eliminated or put off for a year. But you're putting them at risk. And if we truly are committed to our healthy environment and keeping a healthy environment and keeping Evanston livable, and this is just, to me, such an important program that we should stand behind. It's been well trusted. It works for us. I would so much rather see us do a saving somewhere else than on the trees. I would go back and say, take my vote from the forklift or the and place it to the trees. I think it's that important. To get a tree the size that our elm trees are now takes 100 years. And when we lose them, the cost of taking them down is huge. And the emotional loss to the community is also significant. We've just lost almost all the ash trees in town, and all of our neighborhoods have been hit really hard by that. And to see these little twigs put in, I'm happy that they're new little trees that are going in, but it's going to be another 50 years before we get our urban forest back. So I think we're making a bad decision. Absolutely agree with Alderman Wynn. I wish that we had the more information from Ms. Mann's consultant, and I would, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that's going to arrive in time.
Thank you. Alderman Sufferman, and then Alderman Wilson.
Just real quick, Alderman Wilson has me. Alderman Fisk, it should be in your email. Virginia Mann sent it to everybody. Maybe you can look at it while we're discussing. So this is a $328,000 savings. Is that correct, Dave? Yes, that is correct. Does anybody have somewhere else they think they could find $328,000 to preserve this program? I'm willing to listen, but I think we need to accept the severity of the situation we're in. And while this isn't anybody's first option, we're not in a position to pretend that we're not in a really bad position. So if anybody has a $328,000 general fund savings, let's consider it. But otherwise, I think we're in a position where we have to look at this, and I hope that people will vote yes.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. And, you know, I think it's not just me, but I think collectively what we're trying to focus on, and my perception is we're focusing on our ability to deliver services and services that people need to get through the day, get through the week, get through the month. And, you know, for the piece of equipment is maintaining equipment that needs to deliver services. This is not a good choice. It's a bad choice. But we don't have a good choice. So that's the problem. And it's a cash flow crisis. And in the situation where you have a cash flow crisis, yes, this is pushing down the cost of the tree impact to some point down the road, but the cash flow crisis is immediate and it's today. We're not getting money from ticket sales. We're not getting money from parking meters. The list is long. Erica went through it last time. It's really frightening. I'm just going to tell everybody, if the amendment doesn't pass, I'm not going to vote for the full thing. I voted for the whole thing last time. Tonight, I'm not going to do that. So, you know, proceed at your own risk, because if this amended one doesn't go through, I'm going to vote no, and then we can end up with a vote that ends up getting no trees cared for. So I just want to be transparent about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wynn, you had your hand up earlier. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, I did, but I think I've gotten my answers. I've gotten answers to my concerns, and Don, I agree with you. I mean, this is a really difficult question. So I'm still pondering. Okay.
All right. So Alderman Reimbursements.
I'm going to support Don in a request that we do move forward with the amendment. it's devastating to think of the loss of trees. And I've been quiet that this is a tough one. But based on the devastation that families are feeling, complete income loss, trauma, the health risks, we cannot sacrifice any further. So if we can please agree on the amendment to save some of the trees and save some dollars so that we can deliver services to our vulnerable residents, I think that's the most responsible thing to do. And thank you, Alderman Wilson, for the recommendation of the alternative. As difficult as it is, I believe it's the most responsible thing to do.
Thank you. Alderman Fisk?
Yes, thanks. Just to Alderman Suffredin, I did not get the letter. I got the email from Virginia Man, but the letter wasn't attached, so.
Well, it was attached to mine.
Well, it's not attached to mine, so. Anyway, it's okay. I just wanted to let you know that.
All right.
It's cut and pasted in her email.
Yeah.
Her second email. She sent us 2 emails. So second one, it's cut and pasted in that.
Okay, I only got one email, and so I just don't have it. I'm just letting Alderman Suffredin know that.
All right, any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we're voting on Alderman Wilson's amendment. It was moved by him and seconded. Deputy Clerk Richardson, can you please take the roll on the amendment?
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin.
Aye.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
No.
Alderman Fisk. Alderman Fisk.
He's muted.
No.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
All right, so the amendment passes on a 7-2 vote. So now, this is the question for Kelly then. That was the amendment. Do we still then go ahead and vote on the actual item itself?
No, that was the,
That was, I mean, it was
Yeah.
just.
No, the amendment superseded the original, so you're.
Okay, we're good. Okay, thank you, everybody, for that good discussion. Alderman Fleming, can you take us to A5?
Sorry. A5 is the approval of contract award with Courtesy Electric Incorporated for emergency generators. Staff recommends council to authorize city manager to execute an agreement with Courtesy Electric Incorporated for the emergency generator replacement repairs at police fire headquarters, Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 2 in the amount of $249,900. This is for action.
second.
Okay, so this item's open for conversation.
I have one question for this one. It was Fire Station number 1. It says that the generator is satisfactory condition, however, it requires a modification to its remote radiator. I just wanted some more information about why we're not, just about that. Like if it's satisfactory, again, this is all in trying to save dollars. I understand the importance of the other ones. They do a lot of other things, but this one sounds like a little less important. So just trying to get more information about that.
Certainly, Alderman, Mayor, this is Laura Biggs, and the city engineer. So because of the way that some of the lines are encased, it's not really feasible to know if they're leaking or not, and therefore it's also really challenging to maintain it. So it can be done, but basically to do the maintenance and even to really check to make sure there's not a problem, it's more or less the remote area has to be, the remote radiator has to be disassembled. And so for that reason, staff wanted, because basically it's almost impossible to know if it's failing until it's failed.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, this item was moved and seconded. City Clerk, Deputy City Clerk,
Yeah.
please take the roll on A5.
Alderman Nguyen.
You're muted. Oh,
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin. Alderman Suffredin? Okay. Alderman Ravel?
Aye.
Alderman Rainey?
Aye.
Alderman Fleming?
Aye.
Alderman Fisk?
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin stepped away.
Okay. So, item A5, approval of the contract award.
Pardon me. I
Okay.
apologize, Mayor.
I got it. I heard it.
Approval of contract award with Courtesy Electric, Inc. for emergency generator replacement, repairs of police fire headquarters at Fire Station 1 and Fire Station 2. Passes the city council on a 9-0 vote. Alderman Fleming, can you take us to A6?
Yes, A6 is approval of contract award with Ideal Heat Company for the Civic Center burner replacement. Staff is recommending we authorize city manager to execute this agreement in the amount of $117,777. This is for action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah. So I had asked to have this removed, and I have a couple of questions for Dave. In our years of discussing the Civic Center as well as looking at the cost of the boiler, I can't remember if it was your presentation, Dave, or Lara, that put the actual cost of the boiler somewhere in the million or millions plural range. And so I'm looking at this expense of $117,000. And I'm not really sure what are we getting for that much. Is it just putting another Band-Aid on the boiler and getting us through another year?
That is more or less correct. So the boiler is just one part of the entire building HVAC system. So to replace the entire HVAC system, it would cost about $7 million. And then to go along with that work, you'd have to improve the electrical supply as well. And that's estimated another $3 million. So
Okay.
overall, it probably would take $10 million to provide appropriate heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in the Civic Center.
Okay. So if I'm doing the math, at some point, and again, I remember the conversation leading up to this question I have, we're going to have to spend $10 million on a boiler and heating upgrades for that building.
Yeah, it's mostly the air pumps the heat pumps that are in the ceiling of the Civic Center that all need to be replaced, and the lines that run between them and the electrical that feeds all those. The boiler would need some minor upgrades if we did all that work, but yes, this is just one step in trying to get the entire building with proper heating, ventilating, and air conditioning.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a quick question, Peter. I think I had that same question earlier, but you might not remember, Dave, but when we did the entire overhaul of the Civic Center, I know the boiler was a big piece of it, but what are the other kind of large ticket items that were identified as, I know we did the elevators, but kind of identified as needing to make the building really the ideal place for our staff? I know that security became a big issue, and in the meantime, we have the security officers because the building really, I think, could not be reinforced in a proper way. But what are some of the other big ticket items to make the building really feasible?
The range is in architectural services between $10 and $7 million. And that's if you're going to set up the offices differently, if you're going to put in new partitions to make the building more secure, then you have to have your ventilation appropriate for the reconfigured rooms, if you will. And that cost is estimated anywhere between $2 and $7 million. So on top of the $10 million for air conditioning and electrical, I think you'd be safe to say there's another $5 million to adjust the building and the interior walls, and then move the ventilation and electric appropriately for your new room configurations.
All right, and City Manager Storley, so looking at the governor's kind of recovery plan, I think even up until almost the last part of that, we're still in glove or mask and social distancing. So as we've thought about starting to think about kind of moving back into offering services in the building, is there any understanding or conversation around how many people we can put in the building safely in terms of office space, and if there's any reconfiguration that needs to happen with that?
So my connection just froze, so I missed the question.
Okay, so the question was, as we look at, when I looked at the recovery plan for the governor, wearing face masks was kind of on the list, and social distancing for a long time. So assuming we're going to enter the Civic Center with some kind of social distancing protocol, what's the thought that's gone into putting people back in the building and working in spaces where they are socially distanced appropriately, and any kind of retrofitting we need to do to keep the public safe? You know, you go everywhere now and there's plexiglass everywhere. So has there been conversation about retrofitting the building for the staff when they do enter back in, and the cost around there?
It's been a lot of conversations about that. We did install plexiglass at the police station, at the police front desk. The conversations around the Civic Center specifically relate to part of the HVAC system, and that, poor air circulation is not ideal in the current environment. And, I'd asked the city engineer to work with the consultant that originally provided the estimates for some of this work to give us an evaluation of would the poor air circulation in the way that the Civic Center is set up be a contributing factor in any kind of either liability that we might have, or we just don't want people to come to this building and get sick. And I'm not saying that that's the case. I'm just saying it's worth exploring if our building is not an ideal setup for what life looks like after we all start filtering back into a return to work. So I haven't gotten that information yet, but I'm hoping to get it soon. But the overall recovery portion of this is the long timeline. I don't want anybody to think that, at the end of this month, we're going to pack 300 people back into the Civic Center. I don't know that that's going to happen. We don't have a lot of the support needed to do that. So I think that many of our staff are going to be working remotely for quite some time. But we certainly will need to figure out the best way to accommodate a public-facing counter where people could come in and get services. And I'm not sure where that would be. I want it to be the safest place that we can make it for both the employees and the residents. So that's an ever-evolving conversation that I don't have a complete answer for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that leads me to the same comment I had about this before. I definitely don't want people in a building that's not good for the health, whether it's heat and air or coronavirus and the number of things. I also know that we talked about this building and all of the work that it needs to really function in the way we need it. And now in this environment, there are more things that it's going to need to function in the way that's safe for our staff and our citizens to use. So this amount is not frightening to me, but as Alderman Braithwaite said, it is kind of just a Band-Aid. And I'd rather us kind of have a longer conversation about the use of the Civic Center, particularly if a lot of people are going to be working at home and all those things we need to consider, versus paying, $117,000 for something that we know is not going to, be kind of a long-standing repair. So I guess that leaves me at a no for now, because I don't really know, we don't know what the usage of this building is going to be with this virus as it plays out. And again, I would much rather save that 117 for another repair we might need down the line, or put some more money with that if we decide we're going to stay at the Civic Center and make it a usable space for our staff and our residents.
Thank you, Alderman. We're going to go to Alderman Rainey, then Alderman Braithwaite. You're muted, Ann.
How do I get muted? Actually, I have to disagree with Alderman Braithwaite and with Dave Stonebeck. Putting new burners on a boiler that needs burners is not a Band-Aid. If you don't have burners on a boiler that needs burners, you're not going to have heat in the winter. And that's a pretty significant need for a building our size that has so many people in it during the winter. So I think it's just folly to talk about not accepting this expense. I think it's an urgent need and it's almost an emergency. Maybe not during the summer as we're talking about it, but you come to the winter when we have no heat in that building and it'll be an emergency and we'll have to evacuate the building. So you can talk all you want about COVID-19 and needing money, but this building needs heat. And so this is an urgent need. And I would hope that our council is smart enough to vote for this. Thank you.
Alderman Braithwaite? You're muted.
Alderman Rainey by saying, am I muted or am I good?
Oh, you're unmuted now. We can hear
Thank you. I think now is the time to discuss this. And we just heard Alderman Rainey. He estimated the total repair cost for the boiler at $10 million. He also just shared that in order to bring the building up to his standards, that's going to be another $10 million. We already know that there are certain blind spots and security risks in this building. We've had conversations about replacing windows in this building. And I think now, and I was going to make this referral later, I think now would be the ideal time to ask our staff to look into other locations for our civic center. I've participated in many conversations over the past 10 years looking at better options. And I think just given the COVID-19 and the way our building is laid out and with all the repair costs, I would want to direct our staff to look at other options for locating the civic center. Eric, I think we received that JLL report and the civic center, library parking lot. I mean, there are other assets that we can look into, but I would like for us to prioritize looking at an option for the civic center sooner rather than later. We've talked about the downtown being a possibility in the past. I think that makes sense, just given the amount of foot traffic that we have on a daily basis. Downtown Evanston is very central for all of our residents to get to, whether it's public transportation, driving or walking. So I think it makes sense that we explore that. And if we need to find a place to occupy, temporarily, again, particularly given the COVID pandemic, that now would be the best time for us to make that move.
Okay.
I have one quick question, if you, okay. To Alderman Rainey's point, Dave, I don't remember if the memo mentioned this, but if we didn't get these pieces now, like what's the latest? We don't want people to have no heat if the choice is to stay in this building. At what point, like, could we revisit this in July once we have a better idea about what the building, other issues, and then still have it done before the winter? Is this a time-sensitive repair? I mean, before the winter, what is our latest we can go out before we get this done?
I would highly recommend that we do it now because the supply chain for so many different materials is interrupted by the COVID-19 crisis. That if you don't order it now, you may not get the materials in time. And I do want to bring out the fact that Alderman Rainey is absolutely correct. If we don't fix this, we're not going to add heat in that building this winter. And that's not, even if we're not in the building, if the building is still standing and you want to mothball it, you need some type of heat just so that all your pipes don't freeze and have that kind of a crisis. So even if you're mothballing the building, you need some heat in there to prevent all the other destruction that will happen if it's not heated.
Thank you. And just, again, I'm trying to call on people as they raise their hand, so everybody can just make sure to do that. Alderman Rainey, you're out.
Well, I don't know if this meeting is the meeting to discuss this, but just how long do you think it would take to find a location and for the city of Evanston to move out of that building and relocate? I don't see us doing that before winter. So I I'm not a betting woman as a rule, but I doubt that we could do it by this winter, before the heating season. So I think we're going to need to purchase this item. And so let's do it and move on. We're going to need heat this winter in this building.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion? Alderman Braithwaite?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I understand that's a general question, but I would tell you right now, I mean, I don't know how many people are in the building right now, Ann, but I would put it in our city manager's lap to do the exploration.
Yeah, I will just add on to that, that part of our recovery process is interviewing every single division and department in the city and asking them, what does operations look like in a post-COVID world? Or like, how can you continue to do the services that you do under the guidelines that have been presented to us from the state? So we need to be able to effectively implement safety measures and other things in order to reopen. We are taking those interviews, gathering all that information, and then determining how we're going to proceed. And that will be part of our next council meeting discussion as well, in terms of what that looks like and if we need to make any tweaks in how we operate. So there's going to be more information coming about that, but I do think that this is a good time to have this conversation, because we may not have a choice in how we go forward. We may have to make changes simply because of the layout of the building and inherent restrictions on how we can funnel people or queue people or space people out appropriately. But I'm not making any suggestions at this point in time. I'm just saying that we're still information gathering, we're still planning, and we are trying to make the best decisions going forward for what that recovery process looks like, so that we can implement it in the safest way possible.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
Thanks. I guess before we hopped into the conversation, I had an inclination to want to just put this off a little bit and see where it looked like we were going to be sitting in the wintertime. But Director Stoneback, what I hear you saying, and what makes sense to me, of course, is even if we're not in the building, we can't let the pipes freeze, so to speak. That's might be a bit of an overstatement, but we can't. We shouldn't be letting the building go to waste to become damaged for a complete lack of heat. So I'm reconsidering my view on that.
Thank you.
So
We'll get Alderman Sufford in, and then we'll go to Alderman Sufford. You're muted.
Thank you. Dave, how much is parts and how much is labor? I'm unclear reading the memo. And I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me either.
Would it make sense for us to consider getting the parts with the supply chain issues you mentioned, and then holding off on an actual decision on whether we go forward with the work when we can have a full community discussion about the future of the building? Or is that an unwieldy compromise?
I think that's challenging to do, because generally you don't want to buy the parts and provide them to the contractor to install, because then if anything's not right, it's a question of who didn't do things right. Did we not purchase the right thing? So in order to get the warranty and the contractor to make sure it's 100% right, I would not want to split the task into two different parts.
Okay.
Thank you. Alderman Bruce Simmons?
So I think this is back to the situation like the trees. If we don't address it, it'll cost us even more money. And it's our asset nonetheless, no matter our intentions for future use or liquidating it. We're responsible. If we don't have it weatherized in the extreme conditions that we live in, that would be a problem. And to Alderman Rainey's point, I believe it's unlikely, based on my experience in this role, that we would be moving out of the building by what would be maybe October, by the time we need to turn the heat on. So I'm hoping that we can do the responsible thing and move forward with the deferred maintenance and necessary repairs so that we can have heat.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Alderman.
Just-
Alderman.
I did, this is a really good bid, and I did some reference checking with these two contractors. And I found, because I thought it was interesting that this was a low bid. And very good references for both these contractors. The minority contractor had excellent references, as did the primary contractor.
Thank you. Alderman.
Just-
Alderman Nguyen.
Well, this is a really good discussion, and I do agree with Alderman Rue Simmons that it is our responsibility, and actually to not go forward with this as much as we are reluctant to spend any money. It really is neglecting an asset in a way that isn't really fiscally responsible. And we had 27 degrees temperature the other night. So Erica, you're there, I think, in the Civic Center. You probably have warm radiators right now. I mean, we had our heat on 2 nights ago. So we, as much as we all are reluctant to spend this money, and Alderman Sufferton, I appreciate your, trying to figure out a way to make this stretch longer. I think this is something that we have to keep the building intact until we make a decision. But I also agree that looking at these other expenses, we really need to make a decision about this. We've been down this road before, and this isn't the most efficient building to operate. It wasn't the most efficient building to operate in 2006, and offices have really changed even more. Now they're going to change again. Now is the time to look at other alternatives before we spend a lot more money for a building that really was never designed to be an office building.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I want to thank Alderman Braithwaite for bringing up the issue, because I think, as Alderman Nguyen just said, I think it's really important for us to kind of go back and think about this from a not only a cost savings, but a use savings. I mean, how much more efficient would it be for our staff to be in a location where they can actually communicate with one another rather than roller skating down the long corridors? But obviously, if we did make the decision at some future point to leave the Civic Center, I mean, my hope would be that somebody would come along and want to do affordable housing or something creative and the building would be retained. And therefore, we should take care of it, as we should take care of any of our assets until we finally decide what we're going to use them for. But I'd like to, I don't know how much city manager we have in terms of past space use studies, and I know the recent costs for the building maintenance and improvements is something that we do have. But in terms of space, I'd like to know what is in our files and what studies have been already done on that, and can you provide that? I'd very much like to take a look at that.
Certainly, we've got some of that that's been in the works since I believe there was a reference to it maybe late last year. So we started working on updating what a current space analysis of needs would be for the Civic Center, and I can compile that along with the answers to the questions that Alderman Braithwaite made as part of his referral, and we can put that on a future agenda for discussion.
How many of our employees actually work in that building?
I think Laura's on the call. She knows that off the top of her head. I want to say 250
in the building. And what's the square footage of the building? I mean, just
120 or 140,000 square feet.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So it's about right, 250 and 120,000.
Can you social distance?
Easily.
See? It's perfect. It's perfect. We should never move.
All right. Any other discussion on this item?
I guess a couple of quick questions, Dave, regarding this expense. So in the past, we've utilized our staff to maintain the boiler, correct?
Yes.
And currently, how many employees do we have at the building right now?
I don't know that.
5%, 10% of that 200? just given the fact that everyone should be working at home? Any guess?
Are you talking
So
to me?
I guess I'll make my point while you're calculating the math is, if our staff has been doing a good job maintaining the heat over the years, I'm going to assume if I was in the Civic Center on Sunday that it wouldn't be whatever 40 degrees cold. The heat is working. I think just given the taxes on our resources right now, I would ask my colleagues to strongly consider that we don't have many people in the Civic Center right now. I don't know if we have all of our engineering staff working, but now would be the best time to utilize our staff for one more year to maintain the heat to our best ability, given the fact that many of our staff is still sheltering at home. We hold on to that $100,000 for more critical services. Again, given the fact that collection office, I'm thinking about all the places that we collect revenue. Collections office, way too confined, will not work given our current situation. Administrative adjudication will not work given our communication. And I can go down the list, but I'll stop there with, I would like to see our staff continue to maintain the boiler and hold on to that $117,000 for other critical services.
Our staff cannot manufacture burners. They cannot do that. They cannot make them. Not possible.
All right, so thank you. All right, seeing no more discussion on this topic, it was moved and seconded. This is A6, the approval of a contract award with Ideal Heating Company for the Civic Center burner replacements. Deputy City Clerk Richardson, can you please take the roll?
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton.
No.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Nope.
All right, A6 passes the Evanston City Council on a 7-2 vote. And during the discussion, Alderman Braithwaite referred to the city manager to come back to the council after having done some analysis on other potential temporary alarm. Okay, let's move to the next item, which is A8. Alderman Fleming, could you introduce that?
Sure. A8 is Economic Development staff recommend approval of extended guidelines for the Entrepreneurship Support Program grant to the current pandemic and changing needs of the business community. This program will be funded through the Entrepreneurial Program line item. 2020 allocation is $50,000. To date, zero has been sent. This is for action.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all right. Alderman Ruth Simmons.
So I'm hoping that we can support this. The $50,000 we already approved for entrepreneurship support. That program we launched and it's been successful helping our local micro businesses specifically. And this will extend it to allow for payroll dollars and rent to be paid for those micro businesses where that was an exclusion before. And it is for businesses that were operating March, whatever it says in the memo in March, so that it is sustaining our existing business community and not necessarily launching new businesses. This continues to be a need. Many of our micro businesses did not qualify for PPP, and they are not qualified for traditional bank financing. Grants are limited. And this would be a nice and nimble way that we can serve our micro businesses that are often excluded.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Alderman Sufferton, then Alderman Fleming.
Thank you. I just want some clarification. Can this money be spent on general city operations, or does this have to be spent on economic development?
Hi, Alderman Sufferton. This is Paulina, acting Deputy City Manager, this money comes from the general fund, so technically it does not have to be spent on economic development initiatives if the city council chooses to. At the beginning of the year, it was set aside for entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship program.
Okay. And do we have more immediate needs? I understand that this was set aside at the beginning of the year, but the world's changed between the time it was set aside and now. Could this be better utilized paying public safety or roads or any of the basic community services that we're expected to provide and legally obligated to do?
Can jump in on that one. That's definitely just the purview of the council, and we'll take whatever direction the council decides.
I mean, I appreciate like the importance of the micro businesses and that they're often left out of larger aid packages, but I just don't, if we're going to be doing furlough days and we're probably going to explore laying off employees or whatever really unpleasant choices we're going to have to make, is this money that we're to spend in this way right now is my question.
So I'll respond to that if that's okay. Everything is, we have a need in every area right now. And we would be a minority in localities that aren't supporting our business community in some way. And I know that we did the partnership with WYNNE, and that was great. But the need is tremendous. And we have resident self-performing business owners, independent operators that without this support, they are going to be having more human and social service needs because they can't have this bridge until the economy opens back up or some other aid. So it's an emergency. The businesses that would likely apply for this grant are mostly low and moderate income businesses that are operating and living off of their daily revenue opportunities as well.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I also wanted to support this, and I will remind those that are listening and members of the council, when we went through our last heavy recession, you will remember that it was like the larger corporations that were laying people off. And it was really our small business community that helped us to, get out of that recession because they were hiring. And so I think now is the right time to return that investment to our small business community. I'm definitely going to be in support of utilizing the $50K to help support our small businesses and keep them running. So when the time for them to open up, they'll be ready to support our community and continue to hire folks and take care of our town.
Thank you, Alderman. Was there anyone else that wanted to talk on this topic? Alderman Wilson, then Fleming, then Houston.
Thank you. And Alderman Suffredin, your point is well taken, but I think that's part of the reason why this is on the agenda. The program itself was, it's a nice thing that we were able to do at a point in the past. And, the nice thing we were able to do is kind of evolved into more protecting people from the impacts of the crisis. So that's why these parameters are being extended to be more emergency assistance guidelines instead of just the kind of the nice thing that we're in the luxury position to be able to do. This is to help people that are more of a crisis situation and to kind of move beyond that original idea of the program. So I get this and do plan to go ahead and support it.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming?
Oh yeah, thank you. So I definitely, obviously I voted no to a lot of things that spent money tonight. I've also gladly heard from a couple of small businesses that did get some PPP money, but probably more that have not gotten anything and are just too small and, and with their bank and just didn't get the attention they deserve. So while this is not necessarily going to save a business, I think it's definitely necessary. I appreciate that this was looked at again and changed some of the qualifications. I don't want to negate the business owners who don't live in Evanston, but I would say I hope that the majority of the money goes to business owners who not only run a business in Evanston, but also are Evanston residents. because we know that they are probably being, hit a little harder on a lot of different things. So I appreciate the revisions to this. And I'm hopeful that we can get this approved and out to the public pretty fast. I also do appreciate that we have some parameters in here for people who have gotten money in the last 5 years that can't qualify for this money. So hopefully some new businesses that we were not able to service in the past will know about this and can apply for this, and particularly for payroll, that they can help as many people remain employed as possible during this pandemic.
Thank you. Alderman Simmons and Alderman Sufferman.
Yeah, I was just going to add that some of the businesses that have interest in applying for this grant are really partnering with us to serve the city in food delivery services to our elderly and other families in need, and other service businesses. So that is something, an added value to the city as they're our partners in providing services to the residents while they sustain their own business, their own families, and also provide jobs. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Alderman Sufferman.
Sure. To Alderman Braithwaite's point, there's nothing in here that requires grant recipients to do local hiring when things pick back up and there's an opportunity to hire. Would you be amenable to putting some kind of requirement in going forward that it requires local hiring?
So to answer that question, Alderman Sufferman, when myself, Alderman Rainey, Simmons, and Wilson and WYNNE sit on the Community Economic Development Committee, that is something that we all prioritize along with Hecky Powell and a few other community members. So I think it's already built into the application, but I will tell you that we all, and feel free to chime in or just nod your heads, we all focus on that when we give the money, which is local hiring and things of that nature.
But there's no obligation.
If I may chime in.
Sure.
All right. So to answer your question, Alderman Sufferton, there is no clause in the guidelines that require local hiring. I would agree with Alderman Braithwaite that whenever an application goes to the Economic Development Committee, that is a question that comes up at every single application that comes up. And just from at the beginning of the year, I presented the results of a survey that we did of our previous recipients. The majority of them are not really hiring a lot of people. There are some part-time jobs, but the majority of them are solo entrepreneurs. So I don't know that is necessarily worth adding that clause. It's totally up to the council, but I hope that answers your question.
Okay. I would just like to see greater impact beyond the owners of these businesses. It seems like it's just providing grants that will benefit the owners of these businesses, but there's no even potential future economic impact that warrants a $50,000 expense when we have way more needs than we have revenue to support. But I appreciate that that's probably going to be the minority view when we vote.
Thank you. There's another hand up, I think. Anyone else want to talk on this topic? Okay. All right. So this item A8 was moved and seconded. Deputy Clerk Richardson, could you please take the roll?
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton.
No.
Alderman Revelle.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey. Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Thank you. Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
All right. Item A8, approval of emergency assistance guidelines for entrepreneurship support program, passes the Evanston City Council on an 8-2 vote. Alderman Fleming, can you take us to A10?
Yes, A10 is the resolution 41-R-20 extending the declare a state of emergency to June 8th, 2020. This is for action.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
I guess it's me again.
All right. Alderman Fleming?
Yeah, so I know we've done this. This is the third time we've been asked to do this, and even for me, it's still a little bit unclear, particularly now that we have gotten into a little bit of a groove with the Zoom meetings, and I know some of that was under the governor's direction to allow us, but I think it's worth us at least explaining publicly or verbally to the public why we need to extend this past what the governor has already declared for the state, given that we're going to meet again before his state declaration expires.
Mayor and City Manager, I'm happy to address that if you'd like.
Go ahead, Kelly.
So under the state laws, and we've discussed this before about how at least two of them conflict about the timing of state of emergencies. We have been extending the proclamation to the very next city council meeting date. So since the governor has extended the state of emergency for Illinois to the end of May, the very next city council meeting after that would be the June 8th meeting. So we would need council then to decide. So should the governor extend the stay-at-home order, we would continue to likely extend or move to extend the state of emergency. And this goes to other areas too. So funding for the city through emergency reimbursements and FEMA and state fund and aid. They need to know that your municipality is under a state of emergency. So it all kind of goes to this idea that we are in a state of crisis. We are asking for extraordinary measures. We're asking for FEMA reimbursement, state reimbursement, and we kind of need to keep in line with what the state is doing on that level, if that makes sense.
Okay, and Kelly, so because I don't know when we're ever having rules committee again, and I did ask for that to be a discussion at rules committee, I would like to make a reference that I think you provided to everybody, but there was a memo you provided that we have a discussion about this. As you know, Evanston is full of engaged people, lots of attorneys and such, and I think we need to, if nothing else, get our language in line with the state language, and the IML, I think, has conflicts. So I would like us to have a discussion about that. Maybe it's a special order of business before we have rules committee, so that everyone has a clear understanding of what it means. I appreciate you mentioning needing to have this so we can qualify for FEMA money and stuff. That was something that was new to me, so that makes more sense versus just reading the language on the three different jurisdictions that we operate under.
Yeah, and just to be clear, it triggers other emergency it triggers other emergency provisions. So the operation of the EOC that the city's under and all of those things that the ordinance provides. I agree with you. I think there could be some cleanup in some of the language in the ordinance. I'm happy to have that discussion whenever.
All right, so I would like to make a referral if we can have that, Mayor, for a special order of business so that our ordinance does match what the state language is, if that's what we decide.
Fine. Any other discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, Deputy City Clerk, you take the roll on A10, Resolution 41-R-20, extending the declared state of emergency to June 8th.
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Simmons.
Aye.
Alderman Suffredin.
Aye.
Alderman Ravel.
Aye.
Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Fleming.
Aye.
Alderman Fisk.
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
A10 passes the City Council on a 9-0 vote. We're going to go to the last item. Alderman Fleming, could you introduce A12?
Yes, 812 is ordinance 50-0-20, amending City Code Section 10-11-7. Section 567A, passenger loading zone, public carrier stops and stands to add a loading zone at 1723 Simpson. This is for introduction.
Your second?
Second.
Okay. So for conversation, Alderman Simmons.
So this, the business that is working through the process to get licensed is Meals on Wheel. They've been completely compliant. They are providing an essential service, obviously predating COVID, but they are serving hundreds of residents. I think 80% are seniors, and the majority, over 60%, are low income, and the majority of their customers are Evanston residents. So they have tripled their service delivery since COVID has started initially. Now they have down to doubling their delivery, supporting residents that are stuck at home and helping them shelter in place and remain safe and sound. This business again is that their business model is compliant with the zoning and did not require a special use. And we were not able to get it on a parking committee agenda, because we didn't have those meetings. So I'm asking that we bring it in for introduction, approve it, and if the parking committee or anyone else has any questions, then they can get their questions answered before it comes to City Council for action. Michael Rivera is on the call, so if you have any questions about the technicalities of this this ask, please do ask Michael. But we were out with the owner, or I'm sorry, the director of the business, and Michael, and understanding the needs of the residents and the businesses in town before staff made a recommendation for this zoning approval.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Rainey.
Are you asking for a suspension of the rules so we can vote tonight?
I'm sorry,
Are you asking for a suspension of the rules so we can approve this tonight?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I don't know, can I speak to the issue of the loading zone?
Yes.
Even though there's okay.
Oh.
I just wanted to say that our good friend, Richard Fisher of Auto Barn has donated a van so they can carry more meals in their delivery, which I thought was really nice. That's all. So they need a loading zone.
If there's no more discussion, Alderman Ruth Simmons, do you want to just move the motion then to suspend the rules and allow this to be for introduction and action? And then we'll take a vote on that.
Yes.
With a point of order, there needs to be 6 votes or 2/3 of the council present on that vote.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Go ahead, Alderman.
So is there, we're compliant with that, we're all here. So is there any other direction that the law department wants to give?
No, we just need a roll call vote, and it just has to pass by a 2/3 majority for the suspension of the rules.
Okay.
Alderman, I just want to make sure we're clear, because you didn't initially ask for this, and then Alderman Rainey asked. She was asking if you want to suspend the rules this evening and make this for introduction and action, or we just do an introduction and then it shows up on the agenda 2 weeks from now for action.
So why don't we do that, in fairness to anyone that hasn't had a chance, it didn't go to committee. So why don't we just move forward with asking for introduction and send it to City Council next week or 2 weeks?
Okay. So this item was moved and seconded. Deputy City Clerk Richardson, could you take the roll, please, on page 12, ordinance 50-0-20, amending City Code Section 10-11-7, Schedule 7A, passenger loading zone, public carrier stops and stands, to add a loading zone at 1723 Simpson Street.
Alderman Nguyen,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming,
Aye.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite,
Aye.
Thank you. So item A12 passes the Evanston City Council for introduction this evening on a 9-0 vote. We're now going to move to call of the wards. So we will start with you this evening, Alderman Nguyen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to once again thank the city staff for their extraordinary efforts. I continue to hear from residents that they are really pleased with the communications that they get from the city. They feel that they're being well informed, and they're really impressed by how the city has been handling this. I also want to thank all of our businesses and our other members of the various task forces for what they are doing, which is really extraordinary as well. And also to thank the public, because over the weekend I was on several Zoom calls with my extended family scattered across the United States, and some in the Northeast, some on the West Coast, some in the middle. And what we're doing here in Evanston is really following the science. And it's really alarming to hear about people not wearing masks in a number of other states near us. And I'm I'm very relieved that I live in Illinois and that I live in Evanston and that we have such good community spirit about this, that we're all taking care of each other. So thank you, and thank you to all of my colleagues as well.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wilson.
I would agree with all of that. I am particularly grateful for the people in the community who are really going above and beyond and stepping up and helping each other and looking out for each other. That is a very heartening thing to see, and I appreciate that. So thanks to all of you, thanks to the staff, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Simmons.
Thank you. And thank you for making us aware that it's Older American Month. And with that, I want to send a shout out to the Foster Senior Club for all that you do to take care of us in the community. Even when we don't know that we need it, you are there. Thank you for your help over the weekend with the leadership of President Dorothy Strong in promoting and bringing awareness to the importance of our census. Look out for more information from the Foster Senior Club there. And with it being Preservation Month, I wanted to make the community aware that we're working towards a cultural district which scatters throughout Evanston. And there was a initiative years back called Pitch, Preserving Integrity Through Cultures and History, that Dino Robinson is working really hard with a group of citizens, including Mary McWilliams and Ann Earl, to bring this to life. So we want to make you aware of the next public meeting, which is on May 21st, 2020, 10 a.m. It'll be virtual. Look out for that if you're interested in updates on the new cultural district that is coming to the community. And then I just can't stop thinking about the trees from that vote. You know, trees, they have so much value, so much benefit, public health, mental health, aesthetics, land value, property value. Like I look outside and I have joy right now because the trees are in bloom. So I would challenge the environmental community to maybe consider a fundraiser, some sort of a partnership like the Friends of Crown and be the Friends of Trees and help us do more not to lose any trees at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Suffren?
I'd just like to request for our meeting on the 8th that we get an update on the status of the city manager search and what parts of it we can continue to move forward with. We'll know more about the governor's state of emergency plans at that point. So I would like an update from staff on that, please. Thanks.
When I didn't catch, it was a little soft. Would you want that by a certain date?
At our next meeting on June 8th.
Alderman Revelle.
Well, I'd like to echo my colleagues' huge thanks to our staff for all their hard work. And I'd like to just say thank you to my colleagues for the really wonderful discussion tonight about, you know, just scrutinizing every last penny that we're spending and asking really good probing questions so that we could make really, I think, very thoughtful decisions tonight. I just really appreciate tonight's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Rain.
Yes, I agree with everything everybody said about all the congratulations that are due around town. Also, I want to thank all my constituents who took thank you to the healthcare workers at St. Francis Hospital. We have placed 2 banners and 50 yard signs around down Ridge Avenue and then down Austin. And people took the signs and sent messages by signing the signs and writing thank you notes to the various hospital workers. And they placed them up and down Ridge and around down Austin. Also, I want to congratulate one of my constituents who is a firefighter, Jason Hayes, who has been promoted to captain. Congratulations, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fleming.
Yes, I would like to thank a few staff members. I know all of them are working very hard, but Stefan Walker and his team were out battling the beach and trying to get sand there. And unfortunately, they were not winning to Mother Nature, but I Saw them one day when I was out walking. I want to just applaud the work that they're doing. No one's probably paying attention to. As well as I've had the privilege of meeting more staff with the food pantry, and our human services team and our outreach team, and Mike Rivera and the facilities guys are out there in the rain. I'm standing with them, but we have only had one warm weather day out there. But we were all out there for 2 hours on Wednesday, and no one's complaining probably but me. So I want to thank them for doing that. I do want to request from the city manager that I get one of those very nice rain slickers that we have for the facilities team now that I'm standing outside. I'm small. Also want to remind everyone that the produce mobile is taking place tomorrow. It's back at the Levy Center. It is at 9 a.m. I can't remember how many thousands of pounds of produce they're going to have, but it is free if you are a Cook County resident, so please come out for that if you are in need. Also, the City of Evanston Emergency Pantry will operate again on Wednesday. We have been serving thousands of people. It is a sad need to have, but we are very appreciative that everyone on the council supports that effort. A couple more things. My ward meeting is going to be Wednesday the 20th, so an email will be coming out for that. We will be meeting virtually in the evening. And then also just want to send a word of encouragement to our non-union staff that are taking the 10 furlough days. I just want to say that I appreciate, I'm sure that's not an easy thing to do. We appreciate the work that you continue to do from home and trying to do the best you can for the citizens of Evanston. I know that's going to impact everyone differently based on the income they have. So just want to send an appreciation to you all, and also to our unions, that I hope that you will be flexible and helping us to meet the deficits we're having. We know it's a very uncomfortable conversation to have, but please be mindful of our residents who are also struggling to make ends meet here in our city of Evanston, who may not be able to even make their tax bills this year. So I would hope that you all can come to those conversations with an open mind and really hear that we need everybody to pitch in here. Just as Alderman Ravel said, we're trying to cut every cost we have on our side. I'm hoping that we can come to an agreement there so that we can all pitch in and save some dollars as possible. So that is it for me.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Normally I'm really upbeat. I want to make sure again that I'm thanking everyone who's doing just a fabulous job. I am, as always, so impressed with our community, as Alderman WYNNE mentioned, and as Alderman Fleming so thoroughly covered in her remarks. But I'm a little bit sad tonight. We've had an incident at the Sherman Plaza parking garage, and I want to make sure that we have some mental health support for folks out there. Regardless of how well we're doing, there's still an incredible amount of stress on people's lives. And we need to find a way to have folks know that regardless of what situation they find themselves in, that we care about them and we want to pick them up and help. I guess I'm going to ask the mayor to give us a little update on what the mental health community is doing to be accessible and to aid our citizens. But it's a very trying time, and I want folks to know that we care, and we care deeply about not only recognizing the stress that they're under, but trying to help and do what we can to help them cope.
Thank you. And I will say we have on the city website page, there's a bunch of information there for folks that need to reach out and need help. And again, the National Suicide Line is always there for anyone that needs it. We have our crisis counseling program with Amita St. Francis in play. You know, if you need any help, please call 311 or go to the city website. We have a lot of information available. It is a very sad situation tonight. I know several of you are on those texts receiving it, and it's one of the hardest things, right? I think serving in public office is you sort of see the underbelly and things that happen that maybe otherwise you wouldn't know in the community. And I've said before, like, mental health is a real issue, not only in Evanston, but across the country. It's a growing crisis, and it's only going to get worse now because of the stress that people are under with this pandemic. So we need to continue to get the word out that there are services in places where you can go to get help. So thank you for bringing that up, Alderman. Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will join our city council in thanking our staff and just acknowledging their amazing commitment and sacrifice to our town during this pandemic. I also thank you for your leadership, Mr. Mayor, as well as our directors who are working very closely with you. I'm going to join Alderman Simmons in giving a special shout out to our foster seniors, an amazing group of residents and everything that they do. And I also want to acknowledge our ETH staff. This week, they have distributed all citywide a large number of signs just congratulating our seniors, which I thought was pretty amazing. And so thank you all very much for that commitment. And then I think you all should have received an email inviting us to participate in the training. Is it the Evanston something network?
Evanston Cares Network.
I
Evanston Cares
did.
Network. Say that? I'm sorry, someone.
Yeah,
No, I said I took the training.
Yep. So if there's anyone who has more information than me, I think it's pretty cool. I think the foundation started with Aunt Bertha, but I've had a chance to poke around on the website, and I think it's going to be an extremely valuable tool that we can all use to help us to deliver better services to our most vulnerable residents. So a special shout out to the Evanston Community Foundation, and hopefully you'll all join me in signing up for that training course.
Thank you, Alderman. All right, with that, Alderman Wilson, could you read us into executive session?
Thank you. Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes, ILCS 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding litigation. The agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and is an enumerated exception under the Open Meetings Act. The exception is 5 ILCS 120/2AC11.
Second?
Second.
All right. Deputy City Clerk Richardson, could you take the roll, please?
Alderman Wynn,
Aye.
Alderman Wilson,
Aye.
Alderman Simmons,
Aye.
Alderman Sufferton,
Aye.
Alderman Ravel,
Aye.
Alderman Rainey,
Aye.
Alderman Fleming,
Aye.
Alderman Fisk,
Aye.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
All right. So on a 9-0 vote, we are going to recess into executive session. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and following the Evanston City Council this evening.